Welcome back to another edition of the GSMC College Football Podcast on this Wednesday, April 30th. Happy last day of April, everybody. Got a good show for you today. First, I want to go over some of the college football playoff contenders from the SEC, kind of rank them. It's going to be a really interesting year for the SEC. There's, I think, 7 or 8 teams at least that have legitimate shots. So I want to go over some of those first. Also going to talk a little bit about this Bill Belichick North Carolina drama, kind of what's happening in the media with his interview with Hard Knocks, all of that. So we're going to get into that as well. And then I want to talk about why is the state of Florida not producing blue chip quarterback recruits in one of the most talent-rich recruiting states in the nation, not really producing quarterbacks. I want to dive into that and kind of what's happening there. Also going to talk a little bit about some of the winners, some of the losers from the spring transfer portal, and some programs that really took a step forward, some took a big step back. And then finally, to end our day, make sure you stick around. I'm going to talk about some of the best running back rooms in the country. This is obviously subjective, but some of the teams, programs that I think have really great running back rooms, great situations there for the 2025 year. But before I get into anything, I just want to remind everyone that this show is all about you. We thrive on your comments, your questions, opinions, insights, all of that. We love hearing from you. We want to make this as interactive, as exciting as possible. And one easy way to do that is to use the Super Chat feature. To do that, you can go ahead, click the $ in the bottom of the chat box to send in your comment, question, opinion there. This guarantees that your message gets on the air, and it's also just a great way to support our channel and support what we're trying to do here at GSMC. We're so grateful to have you all as a part of our community here, and we thank you for your ongoing support. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the SEC and kind of what's happening in terms of contenders. So I think right now there's a clear-cut top 2 in Texas and Georgia. I have Texas as the number 1 team in the SEC coming into this season. So there's a couple reasons for this. Texas, obviously they did lose some talent, but they also got some big pickups in the portal. Picked up Emmet Mosley the 5th, picked up Jack Endries, also have Ryan Wingo returning, DeAndre Moore returning, and then defensively they signed a couple guys in the winter portal. And then you also have Anthony Hill Jr., who's not a bad football player himself, Malik Muhammad, Colin Simmons. They're all going to be returning on each level of the defense. Simmons on the D-line, Anthony Hill at linebacker. Malik Muhammad has that one cornerback spot locked down. This is a loaded Texas team. Also, a report came out today that said that this Texas roster could potentially cost $35 to $40 million. So a lot of high-profile transfers, a lot of high-profile renegotiations with some of their returning guys. But this is a team that is still stacked, and I think they have a pretty manageable schedule. Didn't get a really tough SEC slate this year. Their big SEC games are going to be at Georgia, and I also think at Florida could be potentially a trap game there. I do think they beat Florida most likely, but it is in the swamp, and Florida, I think, is a little more talented than people give them credit for, so that could potentially be a tough game. And then, obviously, week 1, you have the semifinal rematch of Texas at Ohio State. In the shoe, it's going to be a tough road game for Texas, but I think if they split those Ohio State-Georgia games, even if they lose both of them, they're still probably a college football playoff contender. This is a team that's going to be right up there. Could be a preseason number 1 kind of team, but they're going to be stacked, and we're going to see what Arch Manning can do, too, in his first year as a starter. Obviously, this is a pretty smooth transition from quarterbacks, from Quinn Ewers to a guy that's even more hyped than Quinn Ewers was in Arch Manning, taking over as the full-time starter in 2025. We're going to see what he can do as the full-time guy. I'm excited about the prospects of Arch, but, it's very possible that he could struggle. I think the support, though, around him at Texas gives them a very high floor at the minimum, and potentially an even higher ceiling. Then obviously right behind them is Georgia. So Georgia didn't add a whole lot in the portal. Kirby Smart's never been a really big portal guy. He kind of uses it more strategically to fill certain holes. Got some additions at wide receiver, brought in Zachariah Branch from USC, brought in Noah Thomas from Texas A&M to kind of fill out that room. And they also brought in a running back in Josh McCray from Illinois, Elo Medozier from Army on the defensive side of the ball in the spring portal to kind of fill some of those holes that guys like Jalen Walker, Michael Williams, Trevor Etienne all left at Georgia. But these weren't like eye-popping, multi-million-dollar NIL deals, more guys that filled a specific role for Georgia. This is a team that also didn't really lose a whole lot in the portal. Not a lot of guys transferred out, so they still have most of their depth. They still have a lot of those blue-chip recruits that they brought in just from high school recruiting, and didn't really have any long-term injuries either throughout spring practice, which is something that other teams have struggled with. I also think that the big two question marks here for Georgia is going to be that young offensive line. They're not super proven. And then obviously, quarterback, it seems like it's going to be Gunnar Stockton. That's what everything's kind of indicating right now. Ryan Puglisi is still in contention, but this seems like it's going to be Gunnar Stockton's team. Kirby Smart traditionally kind of relies on quarterbacks that are smarter, have a bigger grasp of his offense, of the scheme, and it seems like Gunnar Stockton is that. We're going to see what he can do. I think that's also going to be a big question mark for them, and the play of Gunnar Stockton and that O-line is really going to determine what Georgia can do this upcoming year. But this is a team that I think at the minimum still wins 9 or 10 games. They still have Kirby Smart as that head coach. They still have all the talent that they brought in over the past couple years, and they didn't really lose a whole lot either. So Georgia's still going to be right up there at the top with Texas. I think those are the clear-cut top two in the SEC. Now, after that, it gets really murky. There's probably, I think, 5 or 6 teams at least that could all potentially be that third team in the SEC. So right now, I have kind of an outside-the-box pick, but I think South Carolina is that number 3 team going into this season. So 9-3 last year, rattled off 6 straight wins to end the season. LaNorris Sellers really came into his own as a quarterback, and I think with a full offseason, with another year coming in being the starter, this guy is going to really shine. Electric dual-threat quarterback. I think he can take them super far. I'm excited to see what South Carolina can do. I know certain people aren't as high on LaNorris Sellers. I've seen him live. I've seen his highlights as well. I think this guy is just a special talent at quarterback and can really drive South Carolina to heights that they haven't seen in a while. You also have Dylan Stewart, the freshman phenom from last year, coming back to anchor that defensive line. He's going to be even better in year 2. Could be one of the best edge rushers in the SEC, in the country even. I think I'm really excited about South Carolina. I think with another year, I think they could potentially do some damage in the SEC. They did lose a couple key pieces. Lost Kyle Kennard, lost Nick Emmanwori. So they did lose some guys where there's going to be question marks on the defensive side of the ball especially. But I think LaNorris Sellers and also Shane Beamer, I really like him as a head coach. I think I love what he's done with South Carolina, kind of turning that program around. I'm excited to see what they can do this year. I'm a little higher on them than some others, but I think the potential for South Carolina is really high. Then I had Alabama at 4. Obviously, Alabama, disappointing year in Kalen DeBoer's year 1 as the head coach. I also think just him being year 2 as the head coach, going to be a lot more comfortable in Tuscaloosa. You're replacing probably the greatest college head coach ever, at least in modern history, in Nick Saban. So expectations were sky high, and they still went 9-3 last year. They did not end on a great note last season, losing to Michigan in that bowl game where they really should not have. There was no business for them to lose to Michigan. But this is still Alabama. This is still a team that has a ton of talent across the board, blue chip guys at basically every position. And also, I like Kalen DeBoer as a head coach. This is a guy that's won everywhere he's been in every single program. And I think that also getting Ryan Grubb back in the fold as his offensive coordinator is really going to help them, help their continuity. Ryan Grubb was a guy that had been with him throughout basically every step of his coaching career. And really, that offense, that was the main reason why Washington went to the national championship a few years ago, was Ryan Grubb's offense, was what they can do. I'm excited to see in that scheme what kind of happens with Alabama. Obviously, there's going to be a new quarterback there, in Ty Simpson, most likely. But I think this team just has too much talent to really struggle. I don't think they take a step back. If anything, I think they stay kind of the same level. But I think this is a team that definitely could make a jump, could certainly be in that college football playoff conversation. I think they pretty much will be hanging around that conversation for the entire season. I think Alabama, though, is really going to take a step up. And then at 5, see, here's where it gets tricky, because you have teams like LSU, Ole Miss, Tennessee, Florida, even potentially Oklahoma, Auburn, that all can make big jumps. I have LSU at 5 right now. So my main reason for that is Garrett Nussmeier returning as the starting quarterback after a first year as a starter where he threw for 4,000 passing yards. But they've also really hit the portal hard. LSU, Brian Kelly, and the Bengals, they have added 17 new guys throughout the transfer portal, throughout the winter and spring portals, and really trying to bolster the depth of that program. So on offense, they brought in Barron Brown, wide receiver from Kentucky, also brought in Nick Anderson, really impressive wideout from Oklahoma. And then you also got a really interesting quarterback transfer in Michael Van Buren, who came from Mississippi State, former top 300 kind of guy, started a good chunk of games last year for Mississippi State. He's transferring to LSU, going to back up Garrett Nussmeier, and then could potentially take over as the quarterback of the future for LSU. So you have a lot of guys that, at the minimum, add depth, and at the highest point, they can really raise the ceiling of this LSU team. I think they kind of bounce back. Also, you have Harold Perkins Jr. returning on defense. I'm really curious to see if he solidifies himself as a first rounder, how much he shows out. He is moving to a new position on the defensive side of the ball, how that'll shake out. But this is a guy that has all the talent in the world. Great freshman season, kind of struggled throughout last year a little bit, but I think he can have a really great year. And then my next 3 are kind of like, I have Ole Miss, I have Tennessee, and I have Florida all up there. I kind of think they're all interchangeable right now. Tennessee, I think I would have had a little higher, if not for the whole Nico situation. They're going to have to bring in Joey Aguilar. He's going to have to learn a whole new offense with brand new wide receivers. I think that could be a little bit of a struggle, or at least there could be a little adjustment time there. Ole Miss, obviously, last year was their most talented roster probably ever. Just barely missed the college football playoff. Honestly, self-inflicted wounds for them. But they're replacing a bunch of guys. Losing, obviously, Jackson Dart, Trey Harris, J.J. Pegues, Trey Amos. A lot of production losing from Ole Miss. But you have a really promising quarterback in Austin Simmons coming in. They obviously hit the portal really hard. That's Lane Kiffin's kind of mojo. That's what he does. I think they're going to be interesting. I don't know if they're really going to be up there this year, but if everything goes right, I think they could. And then Florida, I think, too, is interesting. Their losses last year were all to top 25 teams. You have quarterback DJ Lagway coming back. Did just start throwing again. So I know I talked about that a while ago, but DJ Lagway is throwing again, so that's good. So hopefully those shoulder concerns are not as bad now. I think they're a really intriguing team, though, especially if DJ Lagway kind of takes that next step into becoming an elite quarterback. But this is going to be a really interesting conference. I'm not honestly sure. My whole list could be completely wrong. I think Texas and Georgia are definitely those top two teams right now. But we're going to have to see how the rest of the SEC shakes out. And it's going to be a wild ride to watch. So right now we are going to take our first break of the show. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about Hoodie Bill and what's going on in North Carolina, because it's really interesting right now. But stick with us. We'll be back on the GSMC College Football Podcast.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits, I'm losing shit. A stupid myth, you choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Welcome back to the GSMC College Football Podcast on this Wednesday, April 30th. I had to check if it was Wednesday. Forgot the day for a sec. Just talked a little bit about SEC playoff contenders, what could potentially happen there. Going to talk a little bit about Bill Belichick now, but before I get into that, I just want to remind everyone that this show is all about you. We want to make it as interactive, as exciting as possible, and we would love to hear your comments, questions, opinions, hot takes, insights, all of that. One easy way to do that is to use the Super Chat feature. To do that, you click the $ in the bottom of the chat box to send in your comment question there. This ensures that your message gets on the air. It's also just a great way to support our show, support what we're trying to do here at GSMC. We cannot do what we do without your ongoing support, and we're so grateful to have all y'all as a part of our community here. So I want to talk a little bit about what's going on with Bill Belichick right now. So the big thing here, it came out today. So on February 28th, a bunch of media outlets, including The Athletic, some other big ones, they reported that North Carolina's football program and Bill Belichick were expected to be featured on this season of Hard Knocks. Kind of sounded like the NFL didn't really have a team that they wanted to feature this year. But the deal fell apart days later, shortly before a public announcement was going to be made. So Jordan Hudson, Bill Belichick's 24-year-old girlfriend, she played an instrumental role, apparently, in stopping this production, and a lot of it was related to her request to be heavily involved in the project, according to multiple sources throughout the industry that were briefed on these negotiations. All these sources spoke on anonymity just because they were not authorized to speak publicly, but this is Jordan Hudson. This has been a continuing trend for North Carolina. In December of 24, she sent an email to North Carolina officials identifying herself as the chief operating officer of Belichick Productions. Interesting note, Athletic could not find any company registered under that name in Massachusetts or anywhere throughout the country, any other state. So according to documents that were obtained by The Athletic, NFL Films was scheduled to start filming on March 1st as part of a 2-month stint on campus that would go behind the scenes into Bill Belichick and how he's trying to build that UNC program. But instead, on March 3rd, Jessica Body, NFL's VP of Commercial Operations Business Affairs, she sent an email to North Carolina's council confirming that Showmakers will not proceed with the production of the Belichick project. So a lot of this, it seems like, is tied back to Jordan Hudson and kind of what's going on there. She's had an unofficial role, like I said, since his hiring in December, including being copied on some emails at Bill Belichick's request. There were screenshots that came out of him sending an email to like Mike Lombardi, the general manager of the program, saying, hey, can you CC Jordan on any future emails? And this has been reported in outlets. Jordan Hudson also has a number of different entities that she has listed under her name, including a multi-platform media project that was called Chapel Bill LLC, and then also most recently her involvement in the promotion of Belichick's new book. That's kind of drawn some attention. I'm going to dive into that in a minute, but back to the Hard Knocks. So the decision for NFL Films to back out, it meant that North Carolina lost out on $200,000 of facility fees and also more in just terms of exposure. And this is the same guy that told radio reporters in 2017 that he, quote, wasn't on Snapface and all that, and that he's not really too worried about what they put on InstaChat when they were talking about Antonio Brown. And then going back to that CBS interview on Sunday, so he had to sit down, and there wasn't anything really big. He was asked about why he left out Robert Kraft's comments, and that was probably going to be the biggest story. But then the follow-up question was just, Bill, how did you and Jordan meet? And he was about to ask, didn't have the chance to answer. Jordan Hudson's off camera, and you can hear her saying, we're not talking about this in the background. Really awkward moment because it was a basic question. And if Belichick had answered, this was going to be a non-story. It would be like, oh, okay. And she's also documented that they met on a plane ride before. So just a basic answer would have been a non-story. But she cut him off. She said, we're not talking about this. And it kind of just put a big spotlight on why would you even cut him off there, you know? A day after the interview aired, TMZ also published a story that said, they quoted, alleged there were numerous other instances of Hudson kind of butting in during the interview. And they said that she had even walked out of the interview at one point and delayed it for about a half an hour. And then also yesterday, the day before this report kind of came out, Hudson posted a screenshot of an April 10th email from Bill Belichick to her Instagram account. And also the comment was saying she promised a full statement to be released later. But in the email, Belichick is really going off about how this interview is promoting a book, detailing a time he, quote, effed up as the Patriots coach. But I just think this whole situation's really interesting. Obviously, Bill Belichick has been an NFL head coach for how many years? Obviously knows how to deal with the media, is infamous for kind of his responses to the media, right? You look at when they were, I forget who they had played, but they were asking him all these questions, and he just goes, we're on to Cincinnati. We're on to Cincinnati. We're on to Cincinnati, right? And this is something that he's done throughout his career of decades of being an NFL head coach, an NFL assistant. Honestly, he's never really kind of messed around with the media, but it seems like he's trying to change his strategy, change his outlook. He's never really been one to kind of hold his tongue, hold his words, and always really blunt, always pretty honest in his answers. But it kind of seems as if there's an image change going on here around Bill Belichick. Seems as if they're trying to use more media, and I'm really curious as to what Jordan Hudson's role in all of this is. I think that's a huge factor of what's going on here. I'm also kind of surprised that Bill Belichick actually wanted Hard Knocks at North Carolina. That seems a little interesting to me because it kind of goes against what he's always been about, right? This has been a guy that's never been super hospitable to media, always kind of been trying to stay out of the spotlight, even though, when you're part of one of the greatest dynasties ever, kind of hard to stay out of the spotlight. But a guy that knows how to kind of deal with this and get around in questions. I just think it's interesting, too, that she seems to almost be controlling or his answers or kind of directing what he can say. Because you look at that question of how did you meet, right? That's a basic question, Any couple gets asked that pretty much all the time. And it's something that he could have given just a basic answer and go, oh yeah, we met on a plane ride. And it wouldn't be a big deal, not at all. But why is she coming in and saying, oh, we can't talk about this? Then he didn't. He cut himself off. I just think that's kind of interesting that he's almost being screened, it seems like. And her role, it seems to be, is really, really influential to what Bill Belichick's doing. I just think the whole situation's kind of interesting. I wonder if it's more of just because of the college landscape, of you're dealing with younger kids, could he trying to change his strategy a little bit to kind of relate more to 18, 19-year-olds compared to grown men in the NFL? Is that a possibility of why this is happening? I think that's certainly a potential answer. I just think the whole situation, though, is kind of awkward because this is not the Bill Belichick we know. This is something different, it feels like. And will that kind of difference actually help him at UNC? I'm not really sure. I think it'll be something to certainly kind of monitor just how much her influence shows throughout the time and kind of how he responds to the media, how he interacts throughout post-game interviews, all of that throughout this upcoming year. I think it's going to be really interesting to watch. Does he kind of change up how he's always been known, or will this kind of be a reverting back to the old Bill Belichick? So we're going to take another short break on our show right now. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about why the state of Florida, despite its talent-rich recruiting, why are they not producing blue-chip quarterback recruits? We're going to dive into that in a little bit, but we'll be back on the GSMC College Football Podcast.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Welcome back to the GSMC College Football Podcast on this Wednesday, April 30th. Just talked a little bit about Bill Belichick at North Carolina, kind of what's going on there, but I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about the state of Florida and its recruiting and why are they not really producing blue chip quarterback prospects. So I will preface this. This is not talking about, the guys that are going to the NFL, because there are a lot of quarterbacks from Florida that have been drafted into the league. Dating back to 2016, 11 quarterbacks from the state of Florida have been drafted, which is the third most behind Texas, behind California. And 5 have been selected in the first round, second most behind the state of California, who has had 8. But when you look at high school recruiting rankings, you haven't really seen any of the state's best quarterbacks up there and on any national lists. So from 2010 to 2025, the past 15 years, the state of Florida has only produced 3 quarterbacks who have been ranked among the top 100 prospects nationally. And those 3 quarterbacks, Jeff Driscoll in 2011, Felipe Franks in 2016, DeAndre Francois in 2015. 8 states during that time have produced more top 100 quarterbacks in this time span. Jeff Driscoll, who signed with Florida, ended his career at Louisiana Tech. He is the state's only 5-star quarterback since 2010. This isn't going to change. Dia Bell, son of former NBA player Rajay Bell, he's ranked number 12 overall, number 3 among quarterbacks in the class of 2026, currently committed to Texas. And then also there's a guy in the class of 2028, Neiman Lawrence, who's out of Miami Northwestern, who could have a chance to be one of those top quarterbacks in that class. Obviously, he's still pretty young, 2026 guy, but those 2 are really the exceptions. So why is this happening, right? This is one of the most talent-rich states in the nation in terms of recruiting, but I think it's a lot about quarterback development and then just economics too. So one Group of 5 assistant coach who's been recruiting Florida for over 20 years, he said, number 1, the coaching is not where it needs to be at the high school level for those teams. And then 2, you also don't have enough quarterback gurus, the guys that are just quarterback coaches that'll work on mechanics, stuff like that. It is getting a little better. You see a little bit development, but it's not nearly as much as places like Texas, California, where these quarterback kind of gurus are all over the place. One quarterback guru that is in Florida is Ken Mastrol. He's coached quarterbacks in Florida for the past 2 decades. Students include Teddy Bridgewater, E.J. Manuel, Jacoby Brissett, but he kind of blamed the developmental issues on lack of financial support in the Florida public school systems. High school coaches in Florida, they've been fighting in the state legislature recently for raises. They've claimed that they've notoriously been underpaid for years. And Mestrel said that he's like, I can tell you right now there's 4 or 5 quarterbacks at least that could be a power 4 quarterback in terms of talent, but they're just not getting what they need to develop. He said there was one guy in particular, he mentioned a quarterback, he didn't name him, but he said there's a quarterback I'm working with right now that he could be good enough to go to one of these schools, but we only work together 4 to 6 hours a month. It's not enough. In Texas, they're going over offense, situational stuff. Just that type of coaching that these kids are receiving is much more high level. So even this draft weekend, 2025, there were 14 quarterbacks drafted overall. None were born in Florida, and that has only happened 3 times since 2016. So this is a state where there are quarterback talent. There is quarterback talent. It's just not at a high level. And could also be an under-recruiting thing, misevaluation, right? You look at a guy like Lamar Jackson, came out of Miami, 3-star prospect, number 398 overall in his class. Michael Penix Jr., Heisman finalist at one point, 548 nationally in his class. So definitely there is a case that some of these Florida quarterbacks are just being misevaluated in terms of talent. But you look at Teddy Bridgewater was also interviewed here. Teddy Bridgewater, he said his mother couldn't afford private coaching when he was in high school. He didn't even have a position coach at Miami Northwestern until his senior year, and he didn't work with a quarterback coach until he left Louisville to prep for the NFL draft. So when you compare that to guys that are in California or Texas who have been training with these gurus since they're like 15 years old, there's a really big difference there in terms of development from a young age, in terms of how these guys are being exposed, the types of tournaments, recruiting, events that they're going to. There's a lot different. But this is, of the state's 11 quarterbacks that have been drafted since 2016, only 4 of them were 4-star 4-star or higher recruits. So certainly there is a misevaluation aspect here in terms of the quarterbacks are just not being found in Florida right now. Jacoby Brissett, Jeff Driscoll, Nathan Peterman, Anthony Richardson, they were the only 4 of those 11 quarterbacks that were rated 4 stars or higher. So, but this is not as big of an issue in terms of guys that are starting at the FBS level. I think it's more of a development thing, and these guys are taking longer to get to the next level. Last year, there were 12 Florida-born quarterbacks that started at least 7 games at the FBS level. 6 of them were starters on the Power 4 level in Carson Beck, Fernando Mendoza, Iowa State's Rocco Beck, C.J. Bailey from North Carolina State, Anthony Colandra, and then Garrett Green from West Virginia. But Carson Beck and C.J. Bailey, those were the only 2 guys that were even kind of potentially blue chip recruits in that bunch. Fernando Mendoza was the 140th out of 142 quarterbacks in the 2022 recruiting class. But when he hit the portal this year, this was a guy that was one of the most sought-after quarterback options in the transfer portal. So clearly there was some kind of misevaluation in his talent. But Beck, Mendoza, Becht, and Bailey, they're all expected back to be starters. Austin Simmons, he should be the starter at Ole Miss, another Florida guy. And if all 4 do start, still gives Florida only 4 starters among the 68 Power 4 schools, which is really not a great ratio when you consider that the state of Florida has produced roughly 15% of all blue chip prospects across all positions over the last 4 recruiting cycles. So I think there's a number of different reasons why here. Obviously, the lack of quarterback gurus, the lack of one-on-one coaching, one-on-one attention, also just the fact that, like Teddy Bridgewater said, he didn't have a position coach. I think that's probably a similar situation for a lot of these young quarterbacks in Florida, where they don't even have a quarterbacks coach at their high school. So how are you going to develop in terms of reading coverages, in terms of your footwork, mechanics? If you don't have a guy that knows what he's talking about and can work exclusively with quarterbacks, I think it's going to be interesting to see, does this kind of change throughout the next 5-10 years? Is there going to be more of an emphasis on Florida quarterbacks, especially if you get guys like Diabell come in, and if Diabell takes over after Arch Manning in 2026, 2027, does really well there, is there going to be more of an emphasis on Florida quarterback prospects? I think that remains to be seen. But I think this is just a really kind of interesting situation in terms of this is a state that's probably a top 3 state in terms of overall football talent. They clearly have the athletes across the board in Florida, but why are their quarterbacks not being highly recruited? Why is that state not producing them at a high level? I think it's really kind of interesting, and I think it's a multifaceted answer, but definitely deserves a closer look at kind of what's happening there. And so we're going to take another short break here on the GSMC College Football Podcast. When we come back, we're going to talk about some winners, some losers from the spring transfer portal, kind of what happened there. But we'll be back on the GSMC College Football Podcast.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Hello, and welcome back to the GSMC College Football Podcast. Just talked a little bit about quarterback recruits in Florida. Gonna switch gears, go to some winners and losers from this spring transfer portal window after it has closed in. I wanted to talk a little bit about Georgia first. I think Georgia, while they didn't have a big portal in terms of quantity, I think the quality of players that they picked up was really impressive. You land Elo Medozier from Army. That's a really high caliber prospect, guy that's a sophomore, had a great year last year, 6.5 sacks, a bunch of tackles, a guy that can jump into that role that Micah Williams left on the defensive edge. And then they also bring in Josh McCray from Illinois, was their leading rusher last season. They needed to add to their running back room. They lost Trevor Etienne last year. Needed another addition to kind of fill out that running back room. I think Josh McCray fits that really well. These are guys that they weren't huge pickups, but they fill holes, and I think they were solid in terms of just what they kind of did across the board. Oklahoma also, I think, was another really big winner. They only bring in a couple guys, but they're high impact players in Jaden Ott and offensive lineman Jake McCullough. Jake McCullough from Stanford. He's definitely going to be one of those starters on that O-line as they try to get a little more physical, a little more toughness. They're competing in the SEC again. They kind of got bullied around last season, and I think that Jake McCullough can really help there. Then, in the backfield, you get a stud in Jaden Ott, former All-Pac player, big-time producer at Cal at that running back position. You pair him with new quarterback John Mateer, and you give them a much more dynamic backfield than they had last season. I think you upgraded at quarterback and definitely at running back. Jaden Ott gives them a go-to running back that they can rely on this season. They really didn't have that last year. I loved the pickup of Jaden Ott, and I really like the fit there for Oklahoma. Those were two big wins for the Sooners. I really liked those two additions. Obviously, they didn't add a lot else besides that. A lot different than the next team on the list, their old rival, Oklahoma State. They had a really great portal too. This is a team that had a really rough 2024 season, needed to revamp, and they added a bunch of guys just across the board. They were much more of a quantity type team in terms of what they did in the portal. Brought in reinforcements on both sides of the ball. One big name here is Wendell Gregory, edge rusher transferring in. This was a guy that was the number 102 prospect, I believe, in the country, right around top 100 player, depending on the recruiting sites, but a guy that has a ton of potential on the edge, still is really young. You also brought in Bob Schick, offensive lineman, and he's more experienced offensive lineman, versatile skill set, should definitely help what the Cowboys want to do this year. They had double-digit guys in the spring portal, so much more quantity, didn't really lose a lot, but in terms of adding depth and adding potential contributors to this team, Oklahoma State did really well for themselves, I think. Another team that I liked what they did, I think they're kind of flying under the radar, is Purdue, is the Boilermakers. So, new head coach Barry Odom coming in from UNLV. They have really been working to flip Purdue's roster on its head, weren't shy about bringing in transfers at all. They added players on the defensive front seven, on the offensive line, at wide receiver, at quarterback, really across the board. They get back Ryan Brown, who was originally at Purdue, had transferred to North Carolina earlier in the cycle. I think he was kind of out of contention for that starting position. North Carolina also brought in Gio Lopez, who should be the starter there. And so returns to Purdue, at the very minimum, gives them a depth option at quarterback, gives them a guy that could potentially start. They also bring in two former Georgia receivers in Nitro Tuggle, Michael Jackson III, two of the four receivers that they added this spring. I think those guys, in terms of talent, are really solid additions for the Boilermakers, could potentially earn more playing time that they did at Georgia. Also from Georgia, they picked up Marquise Easley on the other side. And then defensively added Sanders Ellis from Tennessee State, added Ian Jeffries from Arkansas State, Braylon Charles, North Texas, Shiloh Cummings, Memphis. Added a bunch of guys that could potentially be contributors for the Boilermakers. This is a completely remade team. I really like what they did in the portal. I think some of these additions are really going to help out what they're going to do. We'll see if they have an on-field impact. That's a tough place to win at in Purdue. But what they did in the portal, I think, really at least raises their floor and potentially the ceiling for them. Then UCLA, obviously, big-time winner here. You get Nico Iamaleava to come back home, play in California, and also not only get Nico, you get his younger brother Madden, a true freshman who was a really promising quarterback prospect in his own right, signed with Arkansas, decided to come to UCLA with his brother. So not only you get a starter for this season, and then you also have a guy that can start in the years after. If Nico does leave this upcoming year, if his draft status is decent, decides to do 1 year at UCLA and go to the NFL, you have his younger brother right there to take over. And that's a really solid quarterback prospect, a guy that can be your starter for multiple seasons. Those were both really big wins for UCLA, for head coach Deshaun Foster, who kind of needed some wins after struggling in the Big Ten. And last season, looks to improve, looks to make a little more noise. Certainly, they're much more intriguing now than they were before the spring transfer portal. They also signed Javen Thomas from Cal. He will probably take over as the lead running back for UCLA. They needed a guy there, really promising prospect. And then also on the secondary level, you bring in Jameer Johnson from Indiana, Roderick Pleasant from Oregon to give them even more depth. But obviously the big story with UCLA is going to be the Iamaleavas coming into that program and giving them a much higher ceiling. They're going to be a really intriguing team this year. Is Nico going to be able to kind of carry them, or are they going to struggle still? I'm leaning more towards struggle still. They don't have a ton of weaponry, but Javen Thomas does give them a really promising running back. I think overall, though, they are in a much better position than they were before the portal opened. Then on the flip side, there's some teams that I think had definitely a rough transfer portal window. Obviously, starting with Cal, losing Jaden Ott was really, really tough for them. They couldn't really afford to lose him, but also in terms of Jaden Ott, he was one of 5 running backs to leave the California Golden Bears program. So that running back room completely depleted for them. Also, losing Jack Endries, the tight end, is a really big loss for them. This is a guy that produced for them, was a solid tight end for Cal, and that's going to be a big loss in terms of the pass game and in terms of blocking, in terms of running the ball. But the total number of players that have left Cal is now at 18, and that is including the winter portal, but still, you're losing basically a fifth of your roster in the transfer portal. You're losing your all-pack runner, you're one of 5 running backs you lost. You're losing an all-pack tight end. This is going to be a team it's going to be hard to replace those guys. And this is a team that already kind of struggled. As well as losing Fernando Mendoza, your quarterback. That was obviously in the winter portal, but still, the guys that left in the spring just add on to that departure train coming out of Cal. How they rebuild, I think, is going to be interesting to watch, especially with Ron Rivera as their general manager there. Obviously, the other one then, Stanford. That coaching transition from Troy Taylor to Frank Reich. You saw a bunch of players exit the program. A couple linemen, Jake McCullough, I said earlier, going to Oklahoma. The big one, Emmet Mosley, the fifth, he led ACC freshman last year, 48 catches, 525 receiving yards, 6 touchdowns. Guy that's a really promising wide receiver, 3 years of eligibility still, decided to leave, and he's going to Texas now. That was a guy that could potentially have been their number one wide receiver, and a guy that they were really looking forward to stepping into his own as a sophomore this year. And then you lose All-American David Bailey, too, on the defensive line, transfers to Texas Tech. But this is just a whole exodus right now from Stanford. Tough situation for them, as they also, Frank Reich is only a placeholder. He's only there for 7 months. So you lost your head coach. You lost your freshman wide receiver, who was really promising for you. You lost a All-American, basically, on the defensive side of the ball. And you lose a coveted offensive lineman. You lose a couple other depth pieces, too. This is a Stanford program that's in a tough position. And you don't have a head coach for the future. Frank Reich is only going to be there for this upcoming season. So who are you going to hire? Also, how's that going to affect recruiting? How's it going to affect what they can do in the portal, in the next portal? This is a tough program right now. There's not a lot of guys here, and they lost a lot. And then obviously Tennessee, you lose Nico in this NIL dispute, or potentially over wide receiver room and offensive line depth. Not really sure kind of what happened. Regardless, though, you lose your returning starting quarterback, who did take you to the college football playoff last year. And you lose him in the spring, too. You didn't even lose him in the winter. Would have been much better to lose him in the winter, to where they could have replaced him. There were more quarterback options in the portal at that time. You could have given a new quarterback more time to kind of acclimate to what they're doing at Tennessee. It's an interesting offense, much different than what pretty much every other team runs in that Veer-style offense. But you do kind of recover slightly. You bring in Joey Aguilar to replace Nico. But he does look like he's probably going to be a little bit of a downgrade, at least in terms of talent and upside. And he's coming in April. You're going to have to learn a whole new offense. You're going to have to adjust to brand new wide receivers, new offensive line. I think there's going to be a little bit of an adjustment period here for Tennessee. But obviously, big losers here. You go from a potential preseason top 10 team, top 15, to now, I don't know what's going to happen there. Will Tennessee kind of rally around Josh Heupel and new quarterback Joey Aguilar? Will they just be deflated from the Nico situation? I think it's really interesting of what's going to happen here in that spring transfer portal. Or not in the spring, in this 2025 upcoming season for Tennessee after their crazy whirlwind transfer portal window. It's going to be curious, though. So right now we're going to take our last break of the show. When we come back, I want to talk about some running backs. Some of the guys that I think are the best running back rooms in the country. So we're going to get into that, but we will be back on the GSMC College Football Podcast. Welcome back to the GSMC College Football Podcast, presented to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Going to finish up today by talking about some of the best running back rooms, in my opinion, in the nation. Obviously, got to start the conversation with the Penn State Nittany Lions and their electric duo of Kaytron Allen and Nick Singleton. These guys, I think, individually are two of the best backs in the country. Then you combine them, put them in the same room, and they really complement and highlight each other. Allen actually led Penn State last year with 1,108 rushing yards, but then Nick Singleton was only 9 yards behind it, basically. 1,099 rushing yards last year. Did have one fewer game. He was hurt for a game, but also had 12 touchdowns. Both of these guys are NFL caliber starting running backs, and they both kind of do everything well. They both can protect the passer. They both can catch passes out of the backfield. They're both really hard-nosed runners. Both have good ball vision. Just all around great running backs, the both of them. And then when you combine the two, when they can play off each other and give each other breaks and spells, it keeps both of them fresh and it keeps them dynamic. And it's also not a jealousy thing. They complement each other. They're pretty much best friends off the field, and each one of them can take over a game at any time. You look at the Boise State game in the college football playoff this year, that was Kaytron Allen's time to shine. Had over 100 rushing yards that game. Really was one of the key reasons that Penn State kind of controlled that game the way they did. And then you look at other games throughout the season, Nick Singleton's the main guy. He takes over. But they can both do it at any time, and that ability to kind of complement each other, give Penn State an elite duo, I think that's kind of what makes them. I think they're the top running back room in the country. Definitely, if not one, definitely top 2 or 3. But this is a really great running back room. And those two guys, I think, are both NFL starters in the future. They both could have left and gone to the draft this season, but I was expecting at least one of them to go. I kind of figured Kaytron Allen might leave and Nick Singleton would stay, but they both decide to stay, play another year together. And these are guys that Nick Singleton has been playing since his true freshman year. Kaytron Allen has pretty much also been playing since that time. So they're entering their 3rd, 4th season together as this kind of duo, and they know each other so well. They know when to switch out. They know what situation one is better in. I love this duo, and I think they can be even more special this year. Just with coming back, you might have more of an emphasis on the run game. You lose Tyler Warren. Obviously, they added some guys in the pass game, but that's still very much a question mark. This is going to be a run team, and these guys can put up some big numbers, I think. Also, looking at who the Penn State Nittany Lions lost to in the college football semifinal in Notre Dame. I think Jeremiah Love is probably the best college football running back right now, returning. 1,100 rushing yards last season, 19 total touchdowns, and just a guy that can make some freakish plays. Also hurdles a ton. If you ever want to look up something, Jeremiah Love hurdling, guys, is awesome to watch. He clears them. It's pretty crazy. But so that's your headliner, right? Jeremiah Love. You also bring back Jadarian Price. Big play threat, probably the biggest home run hitter in that Notre Dame running back room, a guy that really complements Jeremiah Love's running style well, and a guy that can do a lot more, I think, in terms of putting up stats. This is a really great running back, too, for them. And then also, behind those two, you have 4 running backs that are pretty young, but just a ton of talent. Aeneas Williams, rising sophomore, he's got the most experience. He had the most experience in 2024. 219 rushing yards, 2 touchdowns last season. Also had a really impressive performance in the Orange Bowl. This is a guy that could definitely step into a bigger role. Then you also have another rising sophomore in Keidron Young. bigger bodied back, but pretty light on his feet. He's 235 pounds though, so by far the biggest back in the room. Really strong spring this season too. Should definitely at least crack the rotation in 2025. I think this is a guy that probably is your short yardage, goal line running back, just in terms of pure size. I mean, bringing down a 235-pound man is really difficult to do. That's a big running back. Also, I think it's interesting. So, the coach who helped develop Nick Singleton, Katron Allen at Penn State, Juwan Sider, he left Penn State, and he's now with Notre Dame. So, could the new position coach there help out Notre Dame even more, give some of these young guys some even more potential? But this is a really exciting room, and one that has a ton of depth and a ton of exciting options, I think. Then I kind of went back and forth between some of my other two teams. I have Texas at 3 right now. I think Trey Wisner coming back, he was not really expected to kind of be one of their main running backs last year. Stepped up because of some injuries, and finished the year with 1,000 rushing yards, 5 touchdowns on the ground. Also caught 44 passes for 300 receiving yards and a receiving touchdown. Going to come back, another year of confidence, another year in that Texas system. I think he's going to be a really great back. Then also, you have the return of C.J. Baxter. C.J. Baxter, as a freshman in 2023, while sharing carries with Jonathan Brooks, had 650 rushing yards, 5 touchdowns, was really expected to kind of take over last season in 2024, but torn ACL, LCL, required surgery, so he was out for all of 2024. I'm excited to see the return of C.J. Baxter. If he can get back to that freshman year form, this is a really high-quality duo with him and Trey Wisner. Also, Jarek Gibson. This could be another guy that could potentially step into a bigger role for the Longhorns. Played in all 14 games last year as a true freshman. Rushed for 377 rushing yards, 4 rushing touchdowns. Definitely a guy that could be in that rotation as well. I think those 3 backs give Texas a really strong outlook for this upcoming season, and I'm excited to see really the return of C.J. Baxter. Can he step into a bigger role? Despite that injury last season, can he get back to form from freshman year and be even better potentially? I think that's very possible. I also think Oregon has a really good running back room for this upcoming year. Your main guy, they do lose Jordan James. Jordan James was their leading rusher from last season. Really great running back, had over 1,200 rushing yards. But you replace Jordan James by bringing in McCray Hughes from Tulane, and this is a guy that's a really exciting running back. Will be a junior this year, but had over 1,300 rushing yards as a freshman, over 2,700 rushing yards across his 2 seasons. A guy that also can catch the ball in the backfield, 30 total catches, 243 yards in that time span. I really love McCray Hughes. I think he's one of the top backs in the country. And then you also put him in Oregon compared to Tulane, where Oregon has one of the best O-lines in the nation. I think this is a guy that can be even better because he's going to have more holes to run through, just more talent across the board with him. And also, he's going to have a guy to spell him in Noah Whittington. Noah Whittington, obviously the most experienced member of this Oregon running back room. Going to play his 4th season at Oregon this year. 6th year in college overall. This is a guy that's never been the number 1 running back at Oregon during his time, but integral part of the passing game and running game for Oregon throughout that time span. Has 71 total catches during his career, over 2,000 rushing yards. A guy I think can be a really great running back too, and spell McCray Hughes when he needs a breather. I think this could be the year that he's the most important to what Oregon is trying to do there. And then I think another guy to watch out for here is DeJuan Riggs. DeJuan Riggs, redshirt freshman out of D.C. We saw flashes of him, and at the end of 2 blowout games last year, his running style really kept eyes glued to the TV. I don't know if he's getting starting reps this year, but I think he's going to get a lot more action, and just an exciting runner to watch out for there. This is going to be an interesting running back room. Obviously, headliner McCray Hughes, but the depth there, I think, is really going to help out Oregon overall. So with that, we're going to end our show for today. Thank you so much for tuning in to the GSMC College Football Podcast. Please remember to subscribe, follow the channel, and if you want even more sports content, you can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok for more of the content and updates that you love. Thank you so much, and have a great day.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great. I don't wanna go to